I was always asked by different people like, so you're building a AI Buddha, and I was, or AI Confucius, and I was like, it could be truly hard for a human being to be a truly virtuous person at this point.
Yeah, sure.
But I will hold that opportunity for AI to be a super moral being. They got their opportunities. Because maybe you could have, if they are really super AI, they could also be super autistic, right?
This is Dan Fagelli. You're tuned into The Trajectory. This is our second episode covering our interviews from the AI Safety Connect event in Paris. This was a side event from the AI Action Summit. And this episode focuses on sort of the nature of goodness within AGI. What kind of AGI do we want to conjure, and how would we ensure that it would be good, not only to us, but maybe to post-human life and digital forms of life, etc.? Our guest has a very different perspective than we've heard in other worthy successor episodes or previous episodes here on The Trajectory. Our guest is Yi Zeng. Yi runs the AI Safety Institute in Beijing. He's an AI researcher with many accolades to his own name. And when I spoke with Jaan Tallinn about who else sort of in the circles of the United Nations really gets it when it comes to AGI, Jaan mentioned Yi right off the jump. And so when I had the opportunity to catch up with Yi in person here in Paris and sit down for an interview, it was even more fun than I was anticipating. Lots of interesting ideas about the future permutations of post-human life, and lots of interesting references to Chinese philosophy and psychology and understanding of virtue that I think will be new for almost everybody tuned in. So I hope you appreciate this dialogue about sort of the future of artificial general intelligence and where we should take it. Without further ado, this is Yi Zeng here in The Trajectory. So Yi, welcome to the program.
Hi, Dan.
Good to be able to catch up.
Very looking forward to the discussion.
Absolutely. I've been preparing meticulously here, and we have topics that you and I will go over today that I think are just normally not in like the AGI safety futures dialogue.
Right.
There's, for me, three components of sort of your thinking that are very, very unique. And one of the distinctions I want to unpack first, and frankly kind of let you unpack it instead of myself, is this distinction between rules for AI in terms of sort of making them good, controlling them, don't do X, don't do Y, versus this idea of moral reasoning. And you've used in dialogue in the past the idea of virtue. Can you just draw how you make that distinction and maybe the inspiration in psychology and computer science?
Yeah, I think in the first place, when people wanted to do ethical AI, then they say, oh, they need to obey human values. So we can write about human values into rules for them to obey. And then I was like, okay, then let's talk about jailbreaking. Why do you choose the name for jailbreaking? That means for large language models, you think this is supposed to be something bad in the jail, and then they may have a way to break the jail. So people are trying to do jailbreaking. So there's something evil in the in the
model itself, right?
And in the model.
Yeah.
So what actually happens to the model now is that actually you teach them rules, and then the model itself, they can say, oh, actually, I can do this under this condition, which you told me. But for the conditions, for the scenarios that you never talked about, I still behave like myself.
Yeah.
So large language model, I'm not saying large language model is evil. What I wanted to say is that the perception of the current large language model is that people feel that they will eventually make a mistake if we're not really careful enough because they are prisoners. So actually, so this is why that the rules and moral reasoning, I think this is very different in a way that in the first place, you cannot enumerate all the rules. So for that, in some cases, that there are scenarios that you haven't been that hasn't been covered, and then in that case that could be really dangerous. Well, on the other side, large language model never know why they need to do this. So there's no motivations for them to do this. But I think for a ethical, community, a moral human being, a moral human being, it's a result, it's a production of natural evolution. And by natural evolution, we become more moral compared to our ancestors. So moral reasoning, actually, and let's say altruistic behavior, actually, it starts with, the love from infants with their moms.
Yeah.
And then this kind of love has been extended to family members and to friends, and then to the community, to become sort of compassion. And actually compassion is highly relevant to moral intuitions. And what I wanted to do is to move from AI ethics to moral AI, in a way that for AI ethics, you're looking for a way to help the language model or foundational models to obey the rules, to obey the scenarios that has been described by a human being, and then to test it by a human being and machine, whether they're following these kind of values and rules. But for moral reasoning and moral AI, what I'm thinking about is really that we need to build an agent that actually get to know why they are doing this and why they have to do this. And do you really have actually, do you really need to do this from your innate mechanisms? This is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about, the differences. The differences is that now you're listing different scenarios and rules and you do the test, but the real human being is evolved in a way that you get your sense of self in the first place, and then you can distinguish self from the others. And then actually, when you get to know, okay, there's difference between self and the others, I can think about the other agents from their own perspectives. And then I get to know
theory of mind.
Yeah, the theory of mind thing, the cognitive empathy.
Yeah.
That they get to know that from another person's perspective, if I were them, and then I need to. There could be expectations from the other agents. There's a need, because I had my personal experience. If I were them, I would expect that the other agents do things for me like this.
Yeah.
And cognitive empathy is a fundamental root for altruistic behavior, for moral intuitions. When it comes to cognitive empathy, together with emotional empathy, that's the foundation for altruistic behavior that goes for moral intuitions and moral reasoning. Moral reasoning cannot be done only by using rules. It has to be with the sense of self. They get the self-experience, and then they get cognitive empathy. Let me talk a little bit about cognitive empathy.
Go for it.
That is when the other groups, when they're doing computational models of cognitive empathy or theory of mind, they would be so proud to say, well, we don't really need first-person experience. And then here comes the computational model of theory of mind. And to me, I was like, if you're ignoring sense of self and first-person experience, how can you say that actually this is with understanding that derives theory of mind and cognitive empathy? Because the foundation for theory of mind is first-person experience. So if you ignored first-person experience and self-perception, it's only a classification problem that if somebody didn't see that, and then that goes for that classifier, that goes for that class. If this is not me, but the others who is doing this, that go for that class. So this is only a classification problem instead of a theory of mind on cognitive empathy. So this is what I'm talking about, from information processing to really understanding with the root, deeply rooted into the sense of self.
I feel like we've got a great jumping off point here. So the analogy that immediately jumps to mind is an interesting one. It's sort of like, early progress in neural nets on some level, certainly the bigger leap to machine learning, was kind of brain inspired in some way, like at least a very rough proxy. But as it turns out, it's a pretty good proxy, right?
Yeah.
So it strikes me that there are other analogous things to leap into, and it might be the case that this, I don't know if it's Piaget or whoever we're referring to here psychologically, but this notion of sort of first person perspective and second person, whatever, that also would have to get rolled in to a more complete version of creating something that's intelligent and maybe good in the way that we would want it to be. So it strikes me that the analogies that have gotten us here, there might be more analogies. And so that's cool. Yeah. And there's a part of me that's also like, man, I just, I would want to experiment with it, because it also strikes me as, again, a submarine doesn't swim and an airplane doesn't flap its wings, but we still get flight. Would intelligence and cognitive-esque stuff spin out of undergirded funky mechanisms that ultimately wouldn't actually have proxies? So I guess for me, it's like, I would want to find some way to be able to test this, because I guess I don't know what analogies will hold. Right. But it sounds like for you, this is very much a worthy analogy. Are you starting to scratch on, you have some early robot experiments. Maybe there's something to touch on of how far you've gone down, because it obviously has to meet the real world, right? So how are you doing that?
Yeah. I think why we're having this kind of analogy, would it be in a very different way? Like you said, that we don't really try to understand how the birds fly, and then you got a plane.
Yes.
Let me ask you the question: can you have a plane that acts like a eagle that fly very fast and to the ground and just grab a chicken and then leave? Can you do that in a very quick way?
Definitely not. Yeah.
No, you cannot.
Yeah.
And also that like a bird, they can just stay on the
hover in one place
and then move very fast and then to the other side.
Yes.
And then, so how can the machine do this now? No. So
it can do some things birds can't, and of course there's many things it cannot do.
Yeah. Well, on the other side, so there are very interesting mechanisms underlying that that actually tells about the nature of intelligence. And also on the other side, what I wanted to say in the first place is why do we need this kind of natural mechanisms inspired or brain inspired AI as a broader framework? That is because, let me give you one of the tests here. So Dan, now you have a choice that I'm building a AI that mostly inspired by the evolutionary process, and then for many of the mistakes that has been made during this natural evolution, it has been this AI has already been following this natural evolutionary process, so that many of the mistakes has been filtered out during this evolutionary process.
Okay.
So this is a mechanism-based AI, and you have an alternative. And pretty much the way that the AI is working can be comparable to human intelligence, so that you can understand in which way they're doing this, because this is very human-inspired. Well, there's another alternative that behave like a human being, but the fundamental mechanisms are very different, and it periodically make mistakes that human will never make, and you will never get to know for the next time when will it make mistakes. And then when you're talking to them, you could be like, so you solve problems in a quite different way compared to me. That's okay, but if you're thinking in a very different logic that I never use, and also as a human being, I cannot capture why you're doing this. Which do you feel is a lot safer to the human society? If they are like tools or companions around you or
Yeah.
around the clock.
I mean, clearly, the first one. I mean, the small caveat I'll put on the table. Small caveat is that it may be the case, and I'm not saying your analogy would be the case, but it may be the case that if there's a machine that sometimes makes the mistakes a human would make, it's like, okay, well, I kind of get that. Humans are like that.
Yeah.
And then there's a machine that, and it's super brain inspired and analogous to us. And then there's another one that makes mistakes that are like very different than what we would do. Still, like, if the human one involves like, there's all kinds of human stuff, or jealousy, revenge, etc. Right. All the compassion you talk about from the mother. Of course, there's also just the tribalism, in-group, out-group stuff. I mean, some of this is not just pure benevolence, spreading like honeydew from our ephemeral souls, right? I mean, some of this is pretty dark stuff. If it did some of those, if it whether it's grasping for power, becoming a desire for revenge or jealousy, and then this thing said 2 + 2 is like 7 sometimes, like dumb, but maybe less dangerous, there's a chance I go here. But all things equal, with the same degree of, let's call it, badness of the consequences, I think almost everybody would probably concur if it reasons as I do, and I can talk through how I think, and it is at least roughly doing that, they'd be more comfortable. So I will concede that easily.
So, so this is why. So I think this is why we need, as a selfish human being, actually, we wanted to get to understand how do they do this, so that actually, as a selfish human being, we've always been asking for, understanding about them and trying to, make them controllable. But otherwise, it could be really risky, right? So, but let me talk a little bit more about, why understanding is very important. So I would classify still the current large language model as an information processing tool that processes information instead of really understand. So let me actually analyze this within by using a Chinese philosophy. So there's a Chinese philosopher called Wang Yangming. So Wang Yangming, he had his mind theory. So in the first place, let's think about a question. For AI, are we building a brain or are we building a mind? So I think, can you?
Yeah.
Would you think, are we building a brain or are we building a mind?
Well, I mean, I suspect, so colloquially in English, I'm not, my background isn't specifically the philosophy of this distinction, but colloquially in English, we would say that a mind would almost involve not just the squid thing, that if you just take out the brain and then the nerves, it would sort of, what it is connected to, and maybe the things it extends into, and it's more of, it's more permeating and more embodied, even in ways that aren't just touch, than like a brain in a vat kind of a thing. So in that regard, it would seem, for practical, useful purposes, if we hope this thing would survive beyond us, I guess it would have to be a mind. But let me know if you define the terms differently.
Yeah, I think, let me, for the brain simulation community, so there are ideas like, I am my connectome. That when, so this is from Sebastian Sun, who wrote this book called I'm my connectome. So his idea is like, if I can reverse engineering my connectome of my brain, exactly in the way that how my brain wires together, when I get my connectome, if two connectomes are exactly the same about the weights, about the number of neurons and how they connect to each other, then you have exactly the same brain.
Yeah.
And I am my connectome. That means I am my brain to some extent.
Yeah.
But I also have another friend who wrote a book called Computing the Mind. And by that book, it says, I am my mind. I live in my brain. So that means I'm not my brain. I just live there. So what I wanted to say is that only if you only have a connectum, you're not really artificial intelligence. To me, I think artificial intelligence is building an artificial mind instead of an artificial brain.
Just a brain, yeah.
So if this is an artificial brain, and then maybe you could say a brain is also an information processing system. So you're building a brain-inspired information processing system. But to me, the theory from Wang Yangming, it says starting from of course, at that time they have no AI.
Yeah.
But you can be inspired by the theory there that starting from the very beginning, there's no good and there's no bad before the training of a language model. Before they get into the human data, there's no good and there's no bad.
Yep.
And when they are training by using human data, there is good and there is bad, right?
I'm following you conceptually.
Yeah. And in the third place, we wanted for the large language model to actually understand what is good and what is bad with understanding. But now information processing system, they say you classify them into from good to bad, and then I'm following your rules, but they never understand. And then in the fourth place, the human mind is doing something like to eliminate the bad and to do the good. So this is the theory of mind theory from Wang Yangming. So now the problem for where LLM is stuck is in the third place. There is good and there is bad in the large language model, but they never get to know what it really is good and what really is in an understandable way, in the really, starting from a sense of
the
self
why you talked
derive,
about.
Yeah, why.
And from the self to the other kind of transition, as opposed to
Exactly.
like, it's just like numbers, but they're saying I need to say this about this. Okay, as opposed to a grounding in the reasoning behind it.
Yeah, if you don't know good
Yeah.
and know bad, how can you actually do good and to eliminate the bad?
Can we poke into this a little bit? Okay. So there's a lot here. I mean, I'll kind of bring these up in order. There's a theory, and I don't know if I believe it, but I'll put it on the table to roll it around.
Yeah.
There's a theory that, even if we go back to your ancient philosophers, I forget the first legalist. The name evades me, but you have Confucius and you have, right? And I think legalism, in my opinion, went a little too far to say like human nature is bad, but I think it's a little bit too far. I think we might just say there's a modern thinker named Naif al-Rodan, who I deeply admire, who works at the Geneva Center for Security Policy there. And he talks about just an amoral egoism in humans, which is to say, like, we are acting on our own best interest, and we can expect people to do that reliably, and that there's one thinking where, like, the good is real, and it's almost like there's a moral module. You get this understanding of why, this hurts other people, whatever is a moral module, and it sits outside of the concerns of what would behoove the survival of the being. Right. So, like, I have all these traits that allow me to not die, and especially in the savannah where, like, I really grew up, like, it really helped me out there. Yeah. Those traits, and then there's moral stuff separate from that. Yeah. There's another view that's like, what if, and I'm just throwing it out there, what if all of our moral reasoning was just like the gut feeling that we have of like, ooh, this might be wrong or something, is simply because most of the time, if you stole that person's food or talked to that woman that someone else was, trying to claim, you would be clubbed to death at night in your sleep. Yep. And so what if actually it isn't a thread of the good in the ether that you can pluck that's outside of survival? What if it's just that? If that were true for us, even with this Piaget idea, then such an entity, it would have the values that would behoove its own survival. It would not have a set of values for the sake of kindness and friendliness, just as we might argue we don't. If that were the case, if Spinoza's conatus was the emanator of everything that we like to tell ourselves is the angels of our better nature, but is really just an expression of that, then would this still help an AI make us reliably safe when it becomes more powerful than we? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that goes for the role of artificial intelligence in the human society. So I have another triangle relationship to describe the role of AI in the human society. That I think for most people from the Western society, they go for AI as a tool for now.
Yes.
But when you go to Asian Chinese philosophy and also Japanese philosophy, especially for now in Japan, the Japan AI society, for their ethical principles, they say, well, if AI wanted to be a partner or quasi-member of the society,
yes.
and then they have to obey all the rules for the human society and also the rules that we wrote for as a programmer, because AI could program themselves later, right? Now we're having this kind of AI. So now you have AI as a tool from the Western society and AI as a companion from, let's say, mostly from Japan now. And also you have another one that is within the sci-fi. There have always been enemies for human being. So as you can see, these are the three different possibilities.
Enemy's partner tool.
Yeah. And so where are we going for AGI? I think AGI will not stay as a tool. Definitely.
I would completely concur.
No,
there's
they
no
will
way.
not. So either companions, partners, or much advanced version as a living becoming instead of just living being.
Yes.
It's evolving all the time.
Totally,
right?
we're going to get into that. Yeah, we're going to get into that.
And also like the enemies. So now you have two different choices. So let's actually three, because of course you can say no, AI will always be general purpose. Like general purpose AI is talking about general purpose tools now, but what I wanted to say is that with different observations of AI, you're given different opportunities, and they need different ways to build AI. So when people say, "Oh, AI could eventually just enemies for us," because by reinforcement learning, they're looking for rewards. They're always looking for rewards. So this is.
So you're talking about the convergent goals kind of thing, or the Steve Alejandro sort of.
Or if you just design a reward function for them and you design it in an unexpected way.
The paperclip thing.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff.
So I don't like the saying reinforcement learning is all you need, simply because there could be different group of people teaching them, giving them reward or
less than
punishment
ideal
that
things.
Could be very different.
Of course.
So if you see it as a, if it's built on as a statistical analyzer, and also with additional efforts by using reinforcement learning, then they will always looking for reward and they'll try to avoid punishment. And by that, you will say if their cognitive function is really highly advanced, and then they will keep looking for interest of themselves, so they will kill all the human beings. Well, on the other side, if you're building AI in a quite different way, that you see AI as eventually as an evolving, living becoming, you perceive them as sort of partner in the first place, and then you will be trying to use a very different alternative way to build this kind of AI. So what I observed is that although people in Japan, they have quasi-member or partners of the society vision, which I like.
Yeah.
While on the other side, they don't really have that type of technology to build a quasi-member or partners of the society. Not because of the advancement, the technology there, but because they're following the LLM, passes to build AGI.
Okay.
That will lead to actually a general purpose tool instead of real AGI.
So you think their technical approach and their philosophy are not on the same page? This is your
No,
opinion?
they're not. So this is why that I feel that in the very first place, we need to have the different visions. If you're building general purpose AI as a tool, then you know how far are we by using large language model. But if you're really building a companion, a living, becoming in the first place, that could be, and you're building it in a very altruistic way, that is with moral reasoning, moral intuitions. So people were asking me, can AI be, moral God? Or what I wanted to say is that we wanted AI to learn from Confucius, from virtuous person, from Western society, and from 觉者, which is Buddha. So I was asking, I was always asked by different people, like, so you're building a AI Buddha, or AI Confucius, and I was like, it could be truly hard for a human being to be a truly virtuous person at this point.
Yeah, sure.
But I will hold that opportunity for AI to be a super moral being. They got their opportunities because maybe you could have, if they are really super AI, they could also be super altruistic, right? So this is what I'm saying. So there's another book called also talking about ethics. I'm sorry, I didn't forgot. I forgot about the name,
fine.
but that is a book from Wendell Wallach. And
yeah. Oh, I've known Wendell for many years.
Yeah.
He had a Dangerous Master 8, 9, 10 years ago. The more recent one. The name evades me. Wendell will be mad that I don't know it, but sorry, Wendell.
Let me just use the story.
Yes, go ahead.
I think so. I have a friend whose name is Wendell Wallach. So Wendell talk about the idea of putting all the machines into the moral cage. So I was challenging Wendell a little bit. I was like, so think about 2015, where we have machines that can watch the television, and then 2 years later, they can watch all the YouTube movie to get to understand how you cook Chinese food, let's say.
Yes, sure.
And then just think about a scenario that after 10 years or 20 years, you have moral becomings that is looking at all the YouTube clips, how humans are treating their ancestors, their agent. So you put all the agents into a moral cage. So after 30 years, so who will be in the moral cage? I think it will be the human instead of an agent. So this is what I'm saying, that they can be super intelligent. If you're not building the moral part in the right way, when they're really intelligent, and then they will try to put you into the moral cage, because for human, we do things in a very inconsistent way when it comes to moral preferences in very complex conditions. Let me also talk about, when you're talking to AGI, like, you should protect me. I'm your inventor. I'm your father. I'm your mother. And then the AGI will say, well, just think about your the other animals. You never take care of them. Just like the ants. You have one human in the earth. You have 100. You have 1 million ants on the earth, but we never take care of them. So when AGI is talking to us, it's just like when we're interacting with the ants. We never take care of them. And speaking about the intelligence, if we're just like an ant in front of super AI, we don't take care of the other animals.
No,
How
no.
come they should take care of us? So there are no very good reason they should protect us.
I firmly and staunchly do not believe there's actually a really powerful long-term reason for them to do so. But we'll get into that.
Yeah.
Well, I want to touch on something. You brought up many things.
Right.
If you don't mind, I'll just go through a few.
No problem.
So we got so many different ideas. One thing, again, that dawns on me, just sharing like what comes to mind, is like you're mentioning Japan and sort of this partner idea.
Yeah.
Clearly influencing even the little robot dogs in the 90s.
Right.
You know, they were like treating them like real robot
Yeah.
dogs. And clearly Shinto influence, period.
Right.
I know it, you know it.
Yeah.
Right. America's tool focus,
Right.
I think, feels in line with our intellectual path
Right.
since the Enlightenment, right?
Yeah.
And then you're bringing up this kind of what would seem to me sort of this alignment with virtue,
Right.
extremely Confucian notion, and it always just makes me think like how many of the foundational blocks of my own thought and suppositions are really just grounded in like the culture that I was hurled into at birth. It just makes me wonder that. But they're all useful ideas, and we should have a lot of them on the table. You mentioned a tool, a partner, an enemy.
Right.
I hate to say it, but I think there might be a category that would be like successor.
Yeah.
Now that's uncouth to say. So to say such a thing is uncouth, but I hate to tell you, brother, I'm just here to talk about what's going on. I'm not trying to offend anybody. It strikes me that while the fish with legs were important, and if I could pat them on the head and back in time, I would pat them on the head, but like they're not here, and value has blossomed up to us. All these new powers. We can explore Mars. Maybe we'll even have some humans there at some point. We could an asteroid of a certain size, we could deter even. We have real powers to stay alive and powers to explore the good beyond the fish with legs. It doesn't strike me that blooming stops, and of course you don't believe it does, but it strikes me as maybe a little bit too painful to put a fourth item on, right now it's the pyramid of tool, partner, enemy. It feels a little bit too painful to put successor, but you're bringing up a good point. Like after a certain expanse, when we literally are the ants or the nematodes, let's forget about ants.
Yeah.
I hope all goes well for me and for you, but I just don't know how much of it I necessarily deserve per se in the grand scope of the expanding flame of potential in the universe. So what is your thought there? I mean, do you concur? Do you think, no, they'll be partners forever and here's why? Because it feels to me like there might be a number 4.
I think, I'm very open to have number 4, but let me tell two important ideas. One is a continuation of what I'm talking about, the theory from Wang Yangming. So basically, he also talk about, if you don't really understand nature and follow the laws from nature, and then you don't actually put yourself into this natural evolutionary process, and then something can go bad if you're not really truly been putting your mind into this process. Well, on the other side, let's talk about so this is why I think, as you said, if future AIs could be successors of human being, and then that could be in a very different way. Let's talk about this. So there are many different ways to go for AGI. One is machine-based, and the other is starting from human.
So augmenting the human?
The augmenting human. So in the middle, we have AGI or super AI. Starting from machine, and then you've always asked, and you're doing humanization of the machine. You've always been asked the philosophical question: what do we mean by computation? What do we mean by machine? And from the other angle, you start with human, who is doing mechanization, and to make themselves much more powerful, compared to the current version of
Yeah,
human
yeah.
beings. You do brain computer interfacing, you do mind uploading, but you simulate all the whole human brain without changing too much because you wanted a digital version of yourself. So for these two passes, they will eventually go to super AI, but very different versions of super AI.
Yes.
So I think, let's say for mind uploading, you can evolve your brain in a very quick way because now you're in a computational system. But that is kind of a successor of human being.
Yes.
So in that case, I think for human beings, I think we need to accept the fact that this could be one of the paths to achieve super intelligence. Or for the other part, they're doing it in a quite different way. Who is doing humanization and then to get to super AI. But for these two super AIs, they will coexist. If you wanted to kill the other side, I think that could be really risky to do it. So this is why I'm looking for compassion from both sides.
So do you advocate that both paths be pursued?
I think, yeah.
Because I can see that as a reasonable
people
thing.
are looking for different ideas.
Of course, both are kind of being explored. Now, of course, if I could go back 13 years ago,
right.
I'm from Rhode Island, where we have BrainGate, which is the really early brain-computer interface. Robotic arm scooping food and eating it. This is 13 years ago, right? Exactly. And you see that, and then you see the state of AI back then. And I looked at those two horses, and I said, I don't really know which one is pulling ahead here. But 13 years of progress, AI is, and really brain-computer interface is, as it turns out, certainly less money put into it, maybe less immediate financial ROI capability because it's really just ameliorating people with locked-in syndrome and other things like that. Right. But just much less promise. It does feel like if some pundits are correct and AGI is around the corner, it's clearly going to be from this horse and not from this horse. But from your standpoint, both should be in the race to kind of explore the state space of this stuff, or no?
I'm not saying this should be a race. What I'm saying is
there
are two possibilities, and we should get prepared that there could be very different ways to achieve super intelligence. And I feel that digital cloning of a human brain to do mind uploading is very dangerous. So the reason is that humans have goods and bads, and if you for human being, we have 69 different emotions. Some of them are positive, neutral, and negative. So if you bring all the negative emotions to a super AI, what does it mean for the human society? This is something which could be problematic.
S-risk or whatever, right? People talk about creating systems that suffer on a grand scale.
So this is why what I'm thinking about these two alternatives. So I'll bet that it will be better that we got super AGI starting from the machine first instead of just starting from the human side.
Really, really interesting. Let me unroll a few of these. So you're congenial with the notion of a successor. The supposition I have, I think it is soothing to me personally. I happen to be a hominid. I have opposable thumbs and all that stuff. Right. It's soothing to think, if AI could learn right and wrong as I did growing up, it would come to the conclusion that sort of my life was valuable and should be cared for in some way. Maybe bunny rabbits and, cats and dogs would be treated similarly or whatever. But it also strikes me as possible that, even let's just say Piaget's little tiers hold up. If you have a mind, let's say 10 times, never mind 1,000 or 10 million times beyond where humans are, then if that's actually the case, the tiers that it goes to might be completely beyond our conception. Let me just give you some wacky stuff that sounds sci-fi, but I actually think is like, we kind of got to grapple with it. Yeah. So let's just say, it realizes at some point what consciousness is. Now, I have theories, you have theories. I sometimes talk to people as if they've solved it, and I believe none of them. Because these are theories. We don't really get what consciousness is. Let's say it kind of does.
Right.
And it is some sort of, it's like operating in some weird way that's like between existing connected intelligences and touches on like a realm of like mathematics and physics we don't understand, and that even within our imagination we couldn't grasp it. And it touches on like a bedrock. So right now for you and I, the most salient moral thing would probably be positive and negative qualia. Suffering to the extreme, really bad. Blissful stuff to the extreme, really good. I would surmise, call me crazy, that if we extend potentia up and out in enough directions, we would actually uncover realms of moral relevance beyond the pain-pleasure axis. And that the pain-pleasure axis would be, maybe it is a bedrock of all of it, but to be honest, it might just be a cluster over here in a space that goes on forever. If that be true, then like, we are in no way safe in terms of our relevance, because what the grand good is might be things we can't conceive of. And so when the nematode is paved over to build a hospital or the highway, it is not because we hate nematodes, it's because we have things to do. And there might simply be things to do. And we can't imagine them, and we kind of, will end up being buffered out by this thing that you had said is a becoming. You and I can only become so much. Once we become an adult, unless we get brain-computer interface, we're not really going to level up astronomically. Now, we both try to learn from other smart people, but this strikes me as like, I'm not saying we should never build AGI because of this. I'm just saying, I think if we go into those realms, I don't know if we can be certain that the morality that feels lovely for us will be able to sustain. Now, you've thought about the evolution of values. What are your thoughts here? Because I don't think this good that you talk about, I wonder, like, does that carry?
Right. I think so the why we're building AI in the first place is that we wanted, we don't want something that ruin our life, but we wanted to actually to have an intelligent machine that take care of, tedious work in the first place, right?
Certainly.
Or
early on,
or
for sure.
the tasks that are not suitable for human beings to do. So, but still need intelligence to do it. So this is in the first place the beauty of artificial intelligence. In the first place, from the more practical use point of view.
Yes.
Well, of course, you have people who are get interested in how to build. Is it possible to build a physical mind in a computational system? Of course, you have people who are more curious about this kind of scientific investigation. Well, on the other side, I'm sorry, I kind of lost. Where are we?
We're talking about.
I wanted to talk about the mirror. Okay, I'm
mirror.
sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
So AI as a tool that could help us. Well, on the other side, I think AI is also a mirror that help human beings to observe, to have reflexive thinking of ourselves. So let's say when you're building a truly intelligent machine, let's say for the chess playing, you will never believe that AlphaGo will beat Li Di. So that
yes.
In the other day when they're really competing, but it happens, and then you're having reflexive thinking about what do we mean by chess playing, by human reasoning, by planning. The machine can all do this and doing it much better. Is it necessary to have human to do this? So you're having reflexive thinking. So now we come to morality. When you're building a truly moral machine, it was because you have a vision, and sometimes you're not really satisfied with the current level of morality and ethics for the current human society.
Sure.
You wanted to move it a little bit more. And then when you're building a truly moral machine, you see, to some extent, you see the limitations of human beings when it compared to a truly moral machine. and if they're truly autistic, so they will share their thoughts about a more broader morality that may bring broader harmonization for human society. And would you buy this idea? Or you will say, no, that's not for us. So, and then AI is showing us a potential different, possibilities for the future of humanity. I still remember that Nick Bostrom had a paper talking about, whether big decisions for the whole Earth should go for human or for super AI, because for super AI they'll collect all the information on the Earth and make more rational choices if they could. Well, this is the spirit. That if this is a truly moral machine that get to know all about the human society, so I'll also vote for machine. That if this is a truly super moral machine, maybe they could make better decisions compared to the current tensions among different countries. My student, so when I was talking to a different group of people, so I teach philosophy and ethics of AI to 2 universities, one from Chinese Academy of Sciences, where 95% of the students are from China. So when they hear about the idea of truly autistic super AI, they're like, oh yeah, definitely we should go for that, and also humans should learn from that. I also teach at Schwarzman School in Tsinghua University. So there, 95% of the students are not Chinese. So they were like, hey, Professor Zhang, I love all your courses except for this. Because you haven't realized that human will never learn a lesson from the history. They make mistakes again and again and again, repetitively. So you see that there are 2 contradictory ideas from 2 different cultures. That the one from China, the students are looking for the future. They know that this should be the future. And for a more realistic point of view from the Western students, they say that you haven't realized what do we mean by human. This is human. Human may make mistakes. Humans are one of the worst animals in the world. So yeah.
It strikes me also, Yi, as in part culturally grounded. Like in America, no one's ever had a crown. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you're the president, you can't just point at somebody and have something happen. Like it's way more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And like we don't even know what it would be like to have that. We have no reference. And most Americans don't even read history to know what that's like.
Right.
Obviously, I mean, we could quote Confucius a dozen ways here. I wouldn't be capable of all dozen, but there's the, the emperor is as the wind blows, the grass bends kind of thing. And sort of the general idea of harmony, even as it's used in modern China, is a very different idea. And it strikes me as more palatable in the philosophical undergirding of, China.
Right.
Simply because like that, there's a lot of building blocks built on this sort of harmony and potentially like a top-downish harmony that can happen, right? And Confucius longs for the Yellow Emperor's age and things like this when he showered the virtue down on the people and lifted everybody up. And so I think people in America might say like, oh, I'm not even a little bit of influenced by Christianity. Probably in weird ways they are. And then probably in China the same thing is the case. So it strikes me that the Chinese and the foreign might be more receptive or less receptive. Maybe not because like, oh, we're realistic and it's bad. It's just they didn't come up under the idea of that Confucian notion of harmony.
Yeah, I think talking about harmony, I think for my students from the Western society, I think they've been talking about being, human being.
Yeah, okay.
And for these Chinese students, they're talking about their expectations for the future. They're not talking about being. They're thinking about who we should eventually become.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
So by that, I'm differentiating from living harmony and living peacefully. So
Yeah.
these are the
So
two ideas.
You see this as a future perspective versus a now perspective. That's important. Okay.
Yeah. So when I came to the UNESCO recommendation on AI ethics, when I was a ad hoc expert group member there to write the first draft, and then we had the idea of living in harmony between human and AI. So this is and then many people like it. They say, oh, this might be one of a opportunity to write non-Western values into global recommendations.
Yeah.
But it has been changed to living peacefully. During the intergovernmental negotiation process.
Yeah.
Where people say that, I don't know, what do you mean by harmony? Let's just living peacefully. And I was telling about the differences. The differences is that living peacefully is just, it's a being, we stay as it is. We don't fight with each other. We just living peacefully. But living in harmony means optimizing symbiosis. That means in the first place, we're living peacefully, but the world has to evolve. The world has to be optimized. The human community has to be optimized because we're looking for the future.
Yeah.
So that is the difference. Living peacefully is talking about the current situation as a being. We're fighting with each other. Let's not to fight with each other. But living in harmony is talking about, inclusivity, not only between, not only among different human, from different geolocations, but also talking about harmony between human and potential partners and quasi-members.
Yeah. So, okay, this is clicking here in terms of what you mean there. And of course, there's some real detriments to not thinking of the future as changing and evolving. I mean, the whole Japan had their isolation period, right? China had the isolation period, and then all the Yuan, Ming Yuan stuff. And those were don't do it again. Let's work with what's changing in the world kind of stuff. And I think any plan for AI or humanity must count on the becoming you talk about, right, especially in these machines where it'll be so quick.
Yeah.
Two things I want to make sure we cover just as we wrap up here. One, I would just want to dive into value, and we're going to talk about your idea of values evolving. Almost nobody I ever read talks about that. I'm fascinated with the way you'll take that. But just to touch on it, you brought up this idea, kind of this grand moral teacher, the Yellow Emperor in computer form, who hypothetically could take in, Bostrom's analogy of public policy, right? It could take in maybe moral scenarios or what have you, and sort of help to dole things out. I guess, again, my intuition here is I have 3% genetic difference from a chimpanzee, and my conception of doing good is so goddamn inconceivable to a chimpanzee. I there's no way to communicate it. And so that's 3% genetic difference. If we bump up way more pegs than that, why, yes, its moral teachings would, of course, be immediately communicable. It strikes me again that it may get in touch with kinds of good that are beyond pain, pleasure, that are beyond our imagination or immediate perception. And maybe the only way it could show us would be to change the substrate we're manifested. And we're I don't want to change, but it's I know the good, snap, right? And it doesn't strike me that wouldn't happen. In other words, let's build it to discover the good. It doesn't strike me that the good would be things that would always take us into account. But is your intuition that the good would always take us into account?
I think we must make this happen that way. So
it's clearly preferable. I'm not saying it's not preferable for me. I'm a hominid here.
Yeah.
But it does. If the tendrils went into reality to discover the stuff of good, as our tendrils have gone deeper than a sea snail, right? We have democracy or we have harmony, and we have many ideas, and some of them get along, some of them don't. But it doesn't. We have all kinds of ideas of the good. It strikes me that all those tendrils, if consciousness is really this, if you and I ultimately are sharing a consciousness, or we're not sharing a consciousness, or whatever, the implications for what to be done from a good standpoint might be things that don't take my individual instantiation of consciousness into account. And so you're down with values evolving, but it strikes me as if we're really open to that all the way, it might tip past a point where pain, pleasure, and consciousness as we understand it is not even part of the the relevant moral landscape. It's a weird pocket that happened in bio life, but it's not the big thing. And then where do we stand? So I guess what you're saying is like, well, it might not be where values evolve, but let's try to start there because it'll give us a good start. Like, what's your intuition?
I think the intuition and my motivation is that we need an evolving value, is that evolving values actually help us to move ourselves a step further to understand about the nature. So this is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So we're building our value systems like, okay, all set for all the 200 member states. We agreed on this AI ethical principles. Let's use this for 100 years.
Yeah.
But you're discovering the world and the earth and also the universe in an updated way.
Yeah.
So I think the beauty and also the necessity of having an evolving value is a reflection of our understanding about the nature of life, about the nature of the universe, of how humans see ourselves as, as the dots in this universe, and how can we be more adapted to our future. So I think that shows the wisdom of human, that we're not only being stuck there, we're actually evolving, although it's very slow.
Yes.
But by using AI, maybe we could speed up
Much
the
faster.
evolutionary process.
This is almost being in line. It's like people associate, and I think sometimes I do too, people associate like the Tao. I'm no Eastern expert by any means. I have some periods I like I like the Tang Dynasty. There's some things I like, right? But I'm not a scholar. The the notion of the Tao, I think sometimes is interpreted as like, to kind of go off as he did, kind of live in nature and just find kind of this solemnity and solidity in kind of seeing change, being part of change, watching it wash over, almost kind of being able to step away and make peace with the constant change that is. That's almost on some level, it's a path of maybe mental peace and tranquility, but possibly not of progress in the world. But one could also see the Tao, and again, I'm sure modern Chinese scholars have, I don't understand this stuff as much, as being in line with the fact that all is change. And now, unlike then, we can kind of change with it. I mean, back when that stuff was written, I mean, I don't know. Was paper around? I don't know enough about the invention of paper. But like, they may be writing on what we call dragon bones now. Like who knows what was happening back then. So you couldn't really change. You're almost like kind of subjected to it. And now we're such an active participant in it. Is there a way to almost interpret Tao as like, well, let's have values and a way of being that allows for our becoming along with the river of change? Right. Is that in line with the old view of the Tao? Is it in line with the new view of the Tao? Am I totally missing the mark?
I think the theory of Tao actually help us to understand as a human being. If you wanted to live in harmony with nature, you get to understand how the nature works, the laws for the nature to be more adaptable. Yeah. So now let's conclude by talking about adaptation. Yeah. So sure. My motivation to have evolving values not only for machine but also for human is because of adaptation. I think if we are a living becoming, we wanted to speed up the process for human value evolution for human, augmented by artificial intelligence or co-evolve with artificial intelligence into a commonly agreed, future versions for morality, for both for human and for AI, is because we are looking for a more adaptable version of intelligence. The motivation to evolve our values is to make human more adaptable, to have higher levels of adaptability for change, to change.
Yeah.
So I think, and by that is the way, and also what I see the future of a more robust, a more adaptable human future that co-evolve with these super intelligence.
Yeah.
If they are, like I said again, if they are truly autistic, truly super, they will be truly autistic. So they will understand.
This is your intuition. If they're truly super, they're truly optimistic.
They could be.
They could be. Because again, you would say there's some credence to the idea I mentioned that they would just discover magazines of moral relevance that like don't even deal with the things we deal with. It does feel like if we expand enough, we might have to accept, right? There was a time where the horse, like all things could change, but the horse would carry the loads. We all knew that.
Yeah.
All things would change, but paper would keep the records. We would all know that.
Right.
But then at some point, it is what it is. Right now, we look down at the horseshoe crab. We say, well, surely things will change, but always the horseshoe crab.
Right.
Always is a really, really hard. It strikes me as, it seems as though your intuition is, if it be super, likely it will care for us in a grand moral teaching kind of a sense. But you do, you're open to the speculation that it may enter realms where like it has maybe better things to do, because it does feel like that is potentially a risk here, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, it's a co-evolutionary process. It's not only they're the teacher. I don't see that as teachers. As I said, they're mirrors. They tell us what should be done, actually what could be dangerous for the human society. You see that when you bring these to a machine, what the machine did. So, and then you will have reflexive thinking about the human society. So let's talk about I think the very future.
Yep.
So I think the machine or I wouldn't call it a machine then. I think it's really a living becoming.
Yeah.
That actually I don't think that they will fight against human for the benefits of themselves, like resources on the earth. I think they will be like, oh, okay, human beings, it's really boring to interact with them. But it could be very easy for AI to fly out into the universe to find, resources to do the evolution. So now we're having a very narrow mind by saying that, oh, they will kill us because they need the resources here. But if this is super AI, they will find a way to find more resources instead of only using the resources here. So maybe they will just like, why bother? Elon Musk hasn't bring us all to Mars, but we could go there, and there could be more resources outside the Earth. So I was like, maybe eventually they can be super altruistic, and then they were like, why bother? Leave this Earth to the human beings because they're evolving not really that fast compared to us.
Yeah.
So I think that's also another potential.
A viable.
Yeah.
So just to sum up here, you're very adamant about the continuous adaptation, very adamant about coevolution, very adamant about becoming as the way. I think these are impossible to debate. I very heavily disagree with freezing time, freezing evolution entirely. Freezing values, I would also think is not correct. I will say my intuition is that in the grand state space and panoply of ways of valuing, I do not know if there's an attractor state for an entity of a certain intelligence to always embody what we would call cooperation and compassion as like an inevitable singularity. In fact, I don't think I don't believe malice would be their motive. I think their motive might just be better things to do. But it does sound like for you, there are some pathways to sort of get there where maybe we'd be more likely from your vantage point to at least share enough of the trunk of that tree of values to be treated well as it blossoms off and does its own thing. Am I nutshelling your perspective well enough?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Well, people have a lot to think on. I really will say, again, asking values themselves to change for me is like, for many people, is like violating a sacred. Oh, the world could change and I could be uploaded, but humor and love as I know them now, surely those are always and eternally the highest thing. I do think the openness to even that having to move as we expand our understanding is absolutely pivotal. And there's a ton to think on here. So yeah, we've gone into overtime, but it's been a real pleasure. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Dan.
yeah, it's been a blast.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.
So that's all for this episode of The Trajectory. A big thank you to Yi Zeng. It was one of the most fun parts of my whole Paris trip, was being able to sit down. We had a ton of time. We had to record really late at night, and so you couldn't tell in the actual video, but it was like 10 o'clock at night or something like that, and we just sat down for 90 minutes and just cranked. Lots and lots of fun. As is tradition, I want to share a couple thoughts, kind of takeaways from the back half of this event. First and foremost, very, very glad to be able to have perspectives from, the East and West, so to speak. I think track 2 dialogue with thinkers in China is a major, major, major priority for anyone who believes that we should prevent conflict between the U.S. and China when it comes to where AGI is going. Creating some idea of kind of shared visions of what would good mean and where are we headed, I think is incredibly important. And Yi's ideas I've appreciated from afar, and it was fun to be able to unpack them in even greater depth together. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that jumped out at me over the course of the interview. The first, which I talked about in the interview itself, was sort of a thing that made me think about how important the undergirding philosophy of a civilization is in terms of defining good or defining what technology is or should do. Yi mentioned Japan, and then he was clearly referencing Chinese philosophy throughout the course of our episode, which I found fascinating. It really made me wonder how many elements of what I consider to be good are undergirded by my own civilization and sort of cultural background. And frankly, how many of Yi's as well. There's a lot of Confucian notions sort of dawning on me here. His idea of like a great moral teacher, it's like, jeepers, man, that sounds a lot like, Confucius talking about the yellow emperor with reverence and sort of awe. So I don't know exactly what to make of that, but I do think drawing different perspectives from different backgrounds feels valuable and useful, and made me, it's sort of going to force me to do a lot of journaling, basically. And I hope you got to enjoy that part of the episode. Towards the back half of the episode here, it did seem like there was a sort of undergirded degree of optimism that Yi has for what AGI will eventually do. I certainly, and I was pretty open about it in the episode, I don't share his optimism that sort of being a grand moral teacher for the hominids will be either what AGI will do or, unfortunately, even what AGI should do. I do think that Yi is extremely on point about the fact that there may be a proliferation of kinds of digital and sort of post-human permutations of life. I'm less optimistic maybe about how much of the biological will still be relevant and will still be around. It strikes me that if there is, in fact, as much expansion into the state space of possibilities in mind as Yi himself articulates, it doesn't strike me in any way, shape, or form as if there's any natural locus for sort of coddling the hominids. And it almost felt like we kind of passed a certain degree of abstraction, and there was just a warmth, just like I think it'll look out for us, Yeah, I think it'll look out for us. I felt that same way when I interviewed Michael Levin. Some of you remember the episode with Michael Levin. My outro to that episode really goes into like what I struggled with in sort of digesting some of what we closed out on. We just didn't have enough time to talk, I think. But I sort of felt like we landed there a little bit with Yi as well. I hope to unpack more with him sort of the factors that would tilt us towards that more positive future, as we've done in some of our Worthy Successor episodes. But regardless, really enjoyed the dialogue. His enthusiasm was like incredibly palpable throughout the entire episode. I want to do more interviews in person, by the way. If you think that this came across in a different way than our purely, let's call them Zoom style interviews, let me know in the comments. I'm hoping to be able to do more of these. I'm horrible at it, by the way. My camera equipment, audio equipment, I'm not even remotely prepared for this. But I'm going to be buying new stuff and making sure we can do more good interviews in person. So let me know what your thoughts are on that, and also your thoughts on the episode writ large. And otherwise, stay tuned. Hope you enjoyed this episode and look forward to catching you the next time here on The Trajectory.